how can I use these platforms, these microphones that are available to me now to make a difference?
Welcome to another dynamic episode of Eliot Kelly TV. I have one of the living legends on our show today, Mr. Seth Godin. He's not just an author. He's not just a writer. He's not just a speaker. And he's certainly not just a tweeter. Seth Godin is a thinker, a world-class thinker. And we have him right here on Eliot Kelly TV. Welcome to the show, Seth.
What a nice intro. Great to meet you, sir.
Thank you. In one of your recent articles, and this is the reason why we brought you on the show, you shared that people talk about ego like it's a bad thing, but our desire to do a good job, our self-trust, our willingness to dance with fear, these are fuel if used properly. What role, if any, does self-regulation play in our actual goal achievement, Seth?
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for a great question. People use the word ego to criticize people. He's got a big ego, right? My ego's getting in the way. And I care about language. And the reason I care is because if we have the words right, maybe we can get the concepts right. So there's nothing wrong with ego. The problem is egomania. Egomania says, I'm a narcissist. I'm the only one who matters. I'm here for me first. It's about your experience. It's about your grievance, your challenges, because nobody else has a voice in your head as loud as yours. And that will get in the way of you accomplishing almost anything. The alternative is to realize that ego instead says, how can I contribute to this situation? How can I contribute to this person? How can I do something that requires emotional labor, that's difficult, that's worth doing? There still needs to be an I there, because the I is about our commitment to the community that we live in.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. If you haven't guessed it already, our topic today, we're talking about the ego versus egomania. Tell us some of the characteristics of the ego versus the egomaniac.
Sure. Well, if you are listening to somebody give a lecture and they say, are there any questions? If you ask a very, very specific question that's only interesting to you, that's your egomania at work. You're taking. Whereas if you say, I have a chance to contribute here by asking a question other people are afraid to ask, you're going to benefit, but so are they. That's your ego at work, right? And if you don't raise your hand because you're afraid, that's also a version of egomania, because you are withholding something from the group because you didn't speak up. So, when you showed up and said, will you come on my show? I'm saying to myself, well, here's somebody who realized that it doesn't cost anything to have a show. Spend the time, lead the community. And that is missing from so many places, because instead we're like, how can I troll people? How can I make a buck? How can I find a shortcut? Instead of saying, how can I use these platforms, these microphones that are available to me now to make a difference? And I got to applaud that. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. One of the things that I hold close from my mom actually passed to me is that relationships are much more valuable than money. And I think that's what happens to a lot of entrepreneurs. They would like to excel and they'd like to be like the big stars, but they're not necessarily willing to put in the process or go through the process. One of my favorite pieces of work from you is called The Dip. And I think that's what I was able to relate to that. I've experienced that so many times. It's probably behind you.
Yeah.
I've experienced that so many times when you feel like, okay, how do I make the next step? How do I get to the next level? And the next level is normally through our connections. There's one author who says that you'll be the same as you are today, with the exception of the books that you read and the people that you meet. I think that was Charlie Tremendous Jones, to be accurate. So thank you for sharing that. What does success mean to you, Seth?
I think there are so many ways to measure it. The easiest way to measure it is the worst way, right? It doesn't make any sense to value things simply because they're easy to measure. So if you've got a fancy car, fancy house, or a lot of zeros in your bank balance, that doesn't mean you're successful. It just means you were good at getting a lot of money. Those are different things. For me, success is finding a way to contribute that you are proud of, being missed if you were gone, showing up to make things better for the people who are ready for you to make things better for them. The privilege of having the freedom to do that, of getting the benefit of the doubt, of having access to the tools, that feels really special to me.
Thank you. Knowing what you know now, Seth, was there anything you'd do differently in your professional career?
That's a great question. You know, people sometimes say, if you could give some advice to your 25-year-old self, what would you say? And I got to tell you, it's all the failures of the last 35 years that made me who I am. So if I warned myself away from those failures, I wouldn't be me, and I'm glad to be me. So bring me the failures. They were painful at the time. They're painful to remember now. I guess the only advice I give myself is it's going to be okay. Hang in there, one day at a time, one step at a time, because it's going to be okay.
What are 3 ways that you actually use feedback to help yourself propel to the next level?
So feedback and criticism can be a real problem. But let's try to imagine driving a car down the road blindfolded. You're not going to make it very far. And the reason is all the feedback's missing. You can't tell if you're on the sidewalk. You can't tell if you're about to drive into the ocean. You need feedback to be able to go forward. That's different than criticism that comes from someone who's not good at giving criticism that comes from someone who has an agenda, criticism who comes from someone who thinks they have your best interests in mind, but are just trying to protect you. These amateur forms of criticism must be avoided. You know, I haven't read any of my Amazon reviews in almost 10 years. And the reason is because if you read the 5-star reviews, you got to read the 1-star reviews. And if you read the 1-star reviews, they're just going to bum you out. And I've never met a successful author who said, I'm much better a writer now because I read all my 1-star reviews. It doesn't work that way.
Who or what inspires you, Seth?
Well, Eliot, you might not believe me, but you inspire me. Here I am talking to someone, you're in the Bahamas, right?
I'm actually in London, but I'm from the Bahamas.
Yeah, London, the Bahamas, thousands and thousands of miles away from where I am. And we've never met before. I hope we'll meet again. And here you are showing up into this weird marketplace of ideas just because you can. And what would happen if everyone did that? What would happen if everyone tried to figure out how to make things better, not to take instead? That inspires me every day.
What does the future hold for Seth Godin?
I'm worried right now about what does lunch hold for Seth Godin. We're making my way through the day. You know, I built Akimbo, which is now an independent B Corp, which does cutting edge learning online. And now I'm looking for how else I can contribute to the culture. And I'm not sure what it is. All I know is tomorrow comes around every single day, no matter what we do. So if we can prepare for that by planting seeds, by building another blog post, by writing another book, by helping another person, by turning on lights, the journey's worth it.
Can you share with our audience how they can get in contact with you and hopefully get some of your resources?
Well, they can't get in contact with me because I don't scale. There's just one of me. I have no staff. But you can read 8,000 of my blog posts for free at seths.blog. That's SETHS.blog, or just type my name, Seth, into your favorite search engine. And I'll just keep showing up if people want to keep reading.
Thank you. What are 3 ways that leaders can develop a healthy ego?
Okay, so here's the key question. What would you do if you knew you would fail? Not what would you do if you knew you would succeed, because that's the sort of a trick. But if you knew you were going to fail, what would be worth doing anyway? That's a good way to be honest with yourself and your ego. This idea that leadership and management are the same thing, they're not. Managers use authority to tell people what to do. Leaders need volunteers because they're going somewhere they can't guarantee is going to work. And so part of what's on offer, if you want to be a leader, is to decide where you want to go before you know exactly how to get there.
Thank you, Seth. And finally, as we conclude today's show, what's your message of encouragement for all those persons who are probably at home as a result of the pandemic?
Well, first, my heart breaks for the millions of people who have perished and all the people who've been sick or afraid. The economic disruption here in my country, a long overdue focus on racial injustice, finally people waking up to so many things that were wrong. And what I would say to people is, this has been hard. I get that, but you don't need more time. You don't need to wait for the right moment. You simply need to decide. And it doesn't take very long to decide to walk away from sunk costs, to decide to turn on lights, to decide to lean into opportunity, because possibility is all we've got, and possibility is available to anyone who wants it.
Thank you. If you found any value on today's show, go ahead and smash that share button. You know you got to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We have one quote today. It's actually by Mr. Godin himself. In a crowded marketplace, fitting in is failure. In a busy marketplace, not standing out is the same as being invisible. Today, we were on with Mr. Seth Godin as we discussed ego versus egomania. Never lose your passion.